Hi, Ryan. So this is David. I'm just, I feel you how frustrating it is to, work so hard on a paper and turn it into me and still get a C. So I'm sorry that that happened. So the process of writing it really does require quite a bit of revising. I think that a lot of people, they feel that a writer just is able to sit down and write right from the beginning a perfect paper, and that's simply not the case. It requires so much revision and thinking and going back. So I would like to show you this pyramid that is has been helpful to me in understanding what I need to focus on in my papers and in seeing how to improve it. So it starts from the bottom up, and this is called the pyramid for building effective writing. And so revising and drafting really plays a huge role into this paper. Apart from this, I can show you a few methods on how to begin the paper that would actually be helpful to you. It would be helpful in understanding how to write a small prospectus on it that would help it to turn out better as well. Anyway, I'm just going to get started and go really quickly into this. So what I saw here, it says that focus is the most important. For what purpose am I writing and to what audience am I writing? And how should the context in which I am writing affect how I write? So in other words, we have to focus on the audience. You're writing to Brother Ostad, and he is a humanities expert. So a lot of the content, a lot of the focus should focus your attention towards the humanities portion of your paper, understanding what your thesis really is, what an effective thesis is, writing your thesis statement, and focusing your paper on that thesis statement. That is so important, which that leads us to our content. And I feel like your focus and content on your paper are what need work. So whenever I comment on your paper, I always start from the bottom and I work my way up. And so when you see that I start talking about paper level organization or paragraph level organization and conventions, then you know that you're pretty set. However, your focus and content in this paper, I feel, are lacking, and I'll show you your paper and I'll explain a little bit why. But before that, after it comes content. So what content should I include in this? So with this, the content that you should include into your paper should always tie into the thesis statement that you have written, or that you will write at the end of the paper. The thesis statement that will be your main focus for the rest of the paper. So every content item that you include should not just be there to fill up the space, but should be there to tie into your thesis statement, to back up your thesis statement, or to explain your thesis statement further. Then there's paper level organization, paragraph level, sentence level, style, and conventions. So a lot of us, we get stuck on the focus and content, paper and paragraph level organizations. And this, in all actuality, is the majority of writing, is understanding this. Once you get this down, then you'll be able to write the rest of the paper very easily. The style and the language that you use, the sentence level organization, the conventions. So let me get into your paper after I showed you that. That might be helpful. Let me share this with you. Okay. So I hope that you can see this, and it looks like you can, so that's good. I want to show you from the beginning all these comments that I made. So in the beginning, maybe define a little bit of what an existential artist is in your opinion. So I know that I mentioned that you probably should start with your thesis always, but in this case, it's a little bit difficult to understand what an existential artist is unless you define it afterwards or before. So either start out with a definition of existential artist, what that is, or define it after your thesis statement, directly after, and what you mean by your thesis statement as well. So this may also help you to write a stronger thesis statement as to what the why behind him being existential. So once you know what an existential artist is, that might help you write why he is an existential artist. What I'm trying to say is your thesis statement, I feel it doesn't really tie into what you're trying to say in this paper or what an existential artist really is. So take it from the definition of what an artist is that is existential and try to incorporate a definition into that. One thing that I saw throughout your paper that I could see, and that from my understanding from class, is that an existential artist is somebody that sees, that paints from the subconscious. It's not something that they do consciously. So perhaps mentioning something like that Jackson Pollock is an existential artist because he paints from the subconscious. That's a major theme throughout your paper, and you actually back that up better than you back up him breaking the mold of traditional art and creating his own path. So that would be my first suggestion. You don't have to take that but for face value, that may be helpful to you. Another thing is always clarify your thesis statement. So when you say Jackson Pollock is an existential artist, mention what an existential artist is. Clarify what that is, just briefly. It doesn't have to be long. Just say an existential artist is someone who paints from the subconscious. Now, if you put it before, then you don't have to put it after. And then tell why. Tell the deeper why. So why is he creating his own path? Why does he break the mold of traditional art and create his own path? How does that help him to be existential? You mentioned that, but how does that help him to be existential in any way possible? And that's something that you always need to clarify or back up from your thesis statement. And then another thing that I put is this really what you are wanting to say, or is he existential for another reason? I feel like in your paper, it doesn't really do a good job of mentioning, first of all, how those two items cause him to be an existential artist, and any evidence really backing up those two things helping him to be an existential artist. So one thing, like I showed you that pyramid, is with the focus, everything in your paper should be focused towards this thesis statement, understanding what an existential artist is. So not understanding, but backing up. Everything should tie back into him being an existential artist and why. So maybe tweak this first sentence and add some more. What I put is, in the second sentence, evidence of this is shown through the attitude towards creating art. Something that I learned is never use this unless in the same sentence you have already mentioned the item that you're talking about. So of what? So evidence of what? Of this. What is this? So to link it, mention evidence of Jackson Pollock being an existential artist is shown through his attitude towards creating art. So something like that. Another thing that I would mention for your thesis statement, instead of just saying because of this, Jackson Pollock is an existential artist because he tries to break out of the mold, maybe mentioning something about the subconscious, what an existential artist is, and using the points that you're making throughout the paper, such as Pollock's attitude towards painting emphasizes the unpremeditated act of painting. Adding that, showing that really is him because of his unpremeditated acting of painting, the drip style, which And lastly, the trying to depict the human subconscious. That's something that you're actually doing throughout the paper, and that's something that existentialism is in general. So mentioning those items, okay, anyway, if this is not making any sense, you can ask me some questions, but I'll send you this document as well. So does this make him existential? This is comment number 4. I'm going to click on this so you know. Does this really make him existential, doing the drip method? And try to cut the summaries down. Remember to only use evidences that back up your main claim, and if you do use those evidences, link them to your main claim that he's an existential artist. Right here, use this thesis state. Use this in your thesis statement in the beginning of the paper. This is a point. I mean, you don't have to use it word for word, but the fact that he does not think about what he's about to paint before he paints is channeling his subconscious, and that really is causing him to be existential. So I love the idea, but it's not being tied in up here and giving any evidence towards what you're dealing with. I do like a lot of these ideas. One thing I will say is now, instead of summarizing, I put summarizing all of these ideas mentioned. Instead of that, there's something that's called synthesis, and it means taking all of these ideas and writing the why. So what's the point? So you give these ideas, why does that make him an existential artist? And then restate your thesis statement, tying it into him being an existential artist. So once again, Pollock's attitude towards painting emphasizes that the unpremeditated act of painting does help him to become an existential artist. Once again, the dip style. And what I would say is right here, I don't think that you need to summarize what drip style is necessarily in this moment in time. This could come afterwards, but that doesn't really explain the why drip style ties into him being an existential artist. Remember, these different paragraphs should always link towards that main thesis statement. And I guess you can read that comment when I send it to you. This video is probably already too long and confusing. So right here, how and why, just explain and clarify. And how does this apply? How does this sentence even apply to what you're talking about? And lastly, I didn't mention very much in these paragraphs, but in this paragraph right here, but it's the same thing with the paragraphs above. Try to write your thesis statement, linking it back into your overall paper thesis statement, and clarify it. And then the evidence that you use, instead of summarizing, get down to the deepest why that backs up your claim as quickly as possible. And then lastly, summarize those ideas or synthesize those ideas, tell why they add them all together, and tell why that helps them to become an existential artist. And then lastly, restate your thesis, your paragraph thesis once again, and how that ties into your main thesis. So lastly, how does this play into your thesis at all? This last paragraph does need a lot of work. So I hope this has been helpful. If I could give you a few things to work on for this next revision, it would be to focus on the content that is found within your paper and how that ties into him being an existential artist. Revise your main thesis statement and revise your paragraph thesis statements to fit your main thesis statement. Always tying it back into that main thesis statement when writing. Should always tie it back into that. And then get down to the deeper why. Don't summarize. Get down to the deeper why and explain how that ties into him being an existential artist. So these are the comments that I can give you, and I hope that it's helpful. If you have any more questions, you can ask me. Please revise and get back to me as soon as possible.